Okay, ladies, this is the last video we'll be producing for this particular discussion, for this particular class, and I just wanted to go over and review all the things we've learned and kind of consolidate everything. So let's get started. Okay, so remember the important things about when you're building your own class, as we built this class called Student. The classes consist primarily of two large categories of things. The first are fields, which are also called, I should type this in here, instance variables, which are data about the class. So in the case of the student class, we have data about that student called a name, and data in the form of a grade array that contains all the grades that the student has made, which is a double, of course. Then we have several types of methods possible. First type we have are constructors. Constructors are necessary. Remember, if we don't specify a constructor, we get a default constructor, which basically does what this one right here does, which is nothing. It creates a new object of the class student, but it doesn't in any way, shape, or form initialize any of the instance variables to anything. You can see it is double pair of brackets, so there's nothing happening there. We can also create what are called non-default constructors. There's an example of the first one of those. We do this by overloading. Remember, overloading the method student. So in this case, and by the way, just as a reminder again, the constructor, the method that is the constructor always has the same name as the class. So the method called student, which is the same name as the class, is the constructor. The constructor doesn't return anything, but it does construct a new instance of the student class. In this case, we've overloaded the constructor with a method that just allows you to provide the name. So we have a passed parameter, which is type string, called the name, and it takes that variable, the name, and assigns its value to the internal variable, to the instance variable called name. Here's another overloading, a little bit more elaborate one, which contains not only the name, but also a double array. Square brackets here indicate the array. A double array called the grade array. And it assigns the name to the instance variable name. It assigns the grade array, the passed parameter, to the instance variable called grade array. So that's examples of constructors. You can create other constructors depending upon what your requirements are. You can create as many as you need, but for every overload, remember that every overload definition has to have a different set of parameters that get passed to it. Okay, second special category of methods in a class are the getters and the setters. The getters allow you to retrieve data from the instance variables. So we have three examples of getters here. One that gets and returns the name. One that gets and returns a specific value out of the index array. So we've got, we pass it a parameter actually. Normally in the getter you don't need to pass it a parameter because it just returns the value of the appropriate instance variable. But in this case we've got to pass it an int called index to indicate which element of the grade array we want. Notice it returns a double. So it returns this dot grade array subindex, the appropriate element from the index. And then here's our stub method called getArrayLength, which would return the array length if somebody had written the rest of the code to do it. Okay, then the other variant of these special methods is the setters. The setters allow you to set the values of instance variables. Specifically, and in this case, the setters that we've got frequently, as in the example I showed you earlier, we could have a setter that doesn't do anything but just take the data, assign its value to the instance variable, and go on with it. But in this case, we have setters that are actually returning booleans and checking in some way, shape, or form to see that you are in fact allowed to set the value of that instance variable as a way of controlling access to the instance variable that's part of the class. So in this case, we've got a setter called setName. It passes a string called the name. We check first to see if the name is equal to null, which means there's nothing assigned to it up to now. If that's the case, then we can take the passed parameter, the name, and assign that to the instance variable and return true. We have succeeded in doing it. Otherwise, we return false. Okay, here's other methods. For instance, one that sets the grade, which checks first to see that the grade, in fact, you want to set it to is valid, and it's not less than 0, and that the grade array is actually in existence, that it's not equal to null, that it's checking to see if the grade is less than 0, and if the grade array doesn't, or if the grade array doesn't exist. Let me say that slowly. It's checking to make sure the grade is valid, that is, whether it's invalid, it's less than 0, or if the grade array doesn't exist. If that's the case, it returns false. It has failed. It didn't succeed. Otherwise, we set the grade array subindex, which is a passed parameter, to a new grade, which is passed through, and return true to indicate that it happened. So the setting the whole array involves the same kinds of tests. Remember what we talked about the idea, too, of you being able to put more than one return statement into a method if you want to. Okay, down here we have general methods that are associated with the class. Just do some calculation based on the instance variables or provide data back in some formatted way. Remember, there's a special method called toString, which returns a string. This is the method that systemoutPrintln will call when you attempt to print in a formatted form the value of a particular object of the class. So if we print out a class object, it will print it in this format, student object name, and it will print the name from the instance variable where average is, and then it will invoke the getAverage method to calculate the average, and that will all be returned. This is the getAverage method, which calculates, using the internal data, calculates the average of the grades that are stored in the grade array, assuming that the grade array is not equal to null and the grade array's length is greater than 0. In other words, the student actually has some grades to calculate the average on. If the grade array, if there are no grades in the grade array, when it's a double average is equal to 0, this whole section of code right through here, you can verify that. Around the if statement where we skipped, we return the average, which will just be 0. And last but not least, we have this special method called main. If we include a main method in our class definition, that indicates to Java that this is a starting point for running this class as if it were just a standalone program. So if we want to create a class, if we want to create a standalone program, we have to put a main method in it and then define the rest of the class with all the rest of the code that you need in order to make the program do what it needs to do. Okay, so that's an overview of what all we've talked about. Be sure now, after you've listened to the videos and read over the material in your chapter, that you check in with Carl and me in the lab if you have any questions, and or post them online. And be sure to take the online video quiz, which will be due by, let me see, we'll have to have it done by Monday night, the 5th of May at midnight. So be sure to take the online quiz that's associated with these videos. So, been good talking to you. Hope you have a good rest of your week, and hope you are able to enjoy these videos peacefully and get your online quiz completed. And don't forget, see you later. Bye-bye.